In 1869, John Stuart Mill wrote, "I deny that anyone knows or can know the nature of the two sexes as long as they have only been seen in their present relation to one another." And in 1992, John Gray said, "I totally know. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus." Before the 5 love languages, we had to have another random dude telling us his random theories about relationships, and in the 90s, John Gray was that dude. His book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, has sold over 15 million copies and sparked almost as many sequels, including Children Are From Heaven and the Mars and Venus Diet and Exercise Solution, which I'm sure is from hell. And on this channel, I am reviewing them all because I am actually a really good person to critique John Gray because he and I have the exact same qualifications, which is to say, none. Dr. Gray got his PhD from an unaccredited distance learning facility that was shut down in 2002. And before that, he studied with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who is the founder of the Transcendental Meditation cult, for 9 years. That's how he got his bachelor's and master's in the science of creative intelligence, which is not real? I know a lot of people find transcendental meditation helpful, and I'm not trying to take that away from you. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a casual practitioner. But the higher you got up in that organization, especially when the Maharishi was still alive, the weirder things were. There were rules about what you could eat, what you could wear, when you had to go to sleep. You were discouraged from associating with outsiders because they had negative energy, and it was expensive. That bachelor's of the science of creative intelligence probably ran John Gray about $30,000, which is more like $179,000 in today's money. And the Maharishi claimed that he could give you superpowers, including flight, invisibility, and immortality, but only if you had never ejaculated, which I guess explains why John Gray was celibate for the 9 years that he was with the Maharishi. Here he is in a photo advertising the yogic flying that the Maharishi could definitely totally for real teach you. He worked his way up to being the Maharishi's personal assistant. The Maharishi even told him that someday the whole TM movement would be his. Gray decided that he wanted to run his own grift instead, but he credited the Maharishi with teaching him how to run an organization. He also eventually acknowledged that yogic flying was bullshit, which I'm glad that he acknowledged that. Then he became a therapist, wrote a best-selling book, and started charging other therapists royalty payments to use his technique. That's the American dream, baby.
Whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American or
completely unfucking qualified,
you can make it here in America.
Gray actually says that Americans can't appreciate his work properly because we've all been ruined by feminism. We did it, sisters! It would have been cool if we could have gotten pay equity or health care. But holding back the sales of this guy's book is pretty good too, because boy is it some nonsense. The title comes from this belabored metaphor about how men who are Martians were very depressed and they were living in caves, and then through a telescope they spied the Venusians, who are women, quote, "Suddenly they felt needed." So they invent space travel so that they can go to Venus. Gray doesn't say much about Venus before first contact, so we are forced to only imagine the lesbianism, but he does tell us that the Venusians were very sad until they had a collective psychic vision that strong and wondrous beings were on their way. Once the Martians are arrived, they fall in love with the Venusians, and then everyone decides to go to Earth. I'm assuming Earth is where non-binary people are from, which means it wasn't Adam and Eve, it was Alex and other Alex. When the men and women get to Earth, the atmosphere gives them selective amnesia so that they forget they're from different planets, and then they get very sad. Gray says, without the awareness that we are supposed to be different, men and women are at odds with each other. There is a grain of truth there. Reputable psychologists, including Harville and Helen, including Esther Perel, do talk about how part of what can cause strife in relationships is assuming that your partner must be the way that you are. So if you haven't learned that yet, here it is. Instead of assuming that your partner is going to be like you, recognize that they're going to be like them. Now you can go enjoy the rest of your day and not have to read sentences like, men need lots of encouragement to listen. I strongly recommend that couples not argue. Even when he is irresponsible or lazy or disrespectful, if she loves him, a woman can find and recognize the goodness within him. Gray hits us with this anecdote about how his wife was in a ton of pain after childbirth, and she had run out of painkillers. She couldn't leave the house, so she asked his brother to go get her more painkillers, but then he just didn't. So when Gray got home, his wife was really upset, and he, quote, explodes and goes to leave her. She convinces him to instead stay and hold her. And to him, the moral of the story is that touch was important to her. To a normal person, the learning lesson is to not abandon your partner while they're having a medical crisis, which I would have thought went without saying. He says that 10% of women are going to identify with being more from Mars, and that that's because they were born with high testosterone levels. He also says in a relationship where the woman acts more Martian and the man acts more Venusian, they're just supposed to look deeper inside themselves, because many men have denied some of their masculine attributes in order to become more loving and nurturing. Likewise, many women have denied some of their feminine attributes in order to earn a living in a workforce that rewards masculine attributes. Which is it? Was I a high-T alpha baby, or did I suppress my femininity to be more employable? Let's get out of the way the obvious critique that yes, this book is very gender essentialist. Gender essentialism is the idea that men are this way and women are that way. They're born different. They're inherently different. Khadija Mimbo has a good video about gender essentialism in this book. As I was preparing to write this script, I researched a lot about sex-based differences, especially in the brain. I'm inspired a lot by the If Books Could Kill podcast, which also has a Mars and Venus episode, and I know they come in with like 20 pages of notes. I was reading up on neurosexism, which is the myth that men and women have different brains. Then I was reading the people who say actually neurosexism is a fact, that men and women do have different brains. I was reading about empathetic recognition and HRT and tactical misunderstanding and testosterone rates after birth and structures of power and brain scans and whose short-term memory is better at holding lists. And the more I researched, the more I read this book, the more I realized it comes down to three things. 1, John Stuart Mill was right. The true nature of the sexes is unknowable. 2, in terms of personality traits, men and women are more alike than we are different. 3, men are from Mars, women are from Venus is such an on-its-face, prima facie, asinine book that you do not need to know anything about neuroscience to see that it is dumb. So let's dive in. Gray tells us that Martians value power, competency, efficiency, and achievement. Even their dress is designed to reflect their skills and competence. Police officers, soldiers, businessmen, scientists, cab drivers, technicians, and chefs all wear uniforms or at least hats. At least hats! Can't be a man without a hat. Businessmen and scientists are famous for their little hats, because they're all the Monopoly guy. And this focus on competency is Gray's explanation for why men don't like women to give them unsolicited advice. Women are from Venus, so they're the total opposite. They don't like getting unsolicited advice, but for special lady reasons. Quote, Venusians never offer solutions when someone is talking. People only want advice when they want it. Pretty sure that one is from Earth. A lot of the book is about how men and women are just such total opposites by being exactly the same. For example, and here I'll put on a little hat so you can tell that I'm reading from John Gray's work. He's a man, so I'm sure he wrote it in a hat. Women can wear baseball caps, I think maybe. I cannot pull one off, but it's fine. I'll only wear it when I'm being a man. When a man neglects to honor a woman's feelings, he invalidates them and increases her hurt. It is hard for him to understand her hurt because he is not as vulnerable to uncaring comments and tones. One sentence later, women don't realize how hurtful they are to men. Unlike a man, when a woman feels challenged, the tone of her speech automatically becomes increasingly mistrusting and rejecting. Men sometimes speak in hurtful tones, as opposed to women who sometimes speak in hurtful tones, but like in a girl way. Hurtful tones. For her. He also says that when men are stressed out, they go to their caves. Gray says Martians never talk about their problems. Something we famously know about men is that they never complain. They just have a rationally masculine whine. Venusians get together and openly talk about their problems. By randomly talking about her problems, she becomes less upset. And I have sympathy for people who need more solitude when they're stressed out, but I don't think it's gendered. I think it's just a personality thing. Harville and Helen call this the tortoise and the hailstorm. Tortoises are people who withdraw when they get stressed out, and hailstorms are people who seek contact when they get stressed out. Some people might describe it as introversion or dismissive attachment or overstimulation. It's normal in a relationship to balance each person's need for solitude versus closeness. But Gray says that it's just men who retreat into their caves because they like to solve all of their problems completely alone with no support. He also mentions that needing time alone in your cave for 2 whole days is not a big deal. Everyone has different needs for autonomy versus connection, but 2 days is a long time to not engage with your partner, especially if you have children, which John Gray does. But never fear, if you're upset that your husband isn't talking to you, you can do any number of activities, including listen to self-improvement tapes, take a bubble bath, see a therapist, or go shopping. You know women, always seeing therapists, and then those therapists are always like, It sounds like the relationship you're in isn't very supportive. Also, if you go into a man's cave, the dragon who guards it will burn you, which you can't introduce a new species now, comrade. Which planet are the dragons from? Especially because later he says, in every man is a knight in shining armor who wants to use a sword to slay a dragon and rescue a princess, and that the problem is that women keep giving them nooses and poison to slay dragons, and that's why men don't want to get married. The whole metaphor is a labyrinth, except when you get to the center, instead of a minotaur, it's more metaphors. Another metaphor is that men are like rubber bands, and you have to let them get as far away from you as possible so that they can snap back toward you. And that's why twice a year I fly to Australia with my boyfriend and then I strand him there while I fly home. Spring back. John Gray also has a full slideshow of stuff that he just projects onto women. He says the Venusians communicated in an unspoken language. We need you. Your power and strength can bring us great fulfillment, filling a void deep within our being. Many women instinctively understand how to give this message. In the beginning of a relationship, a woman gives a man a brief look that says, you could be the one to make me happy. In this subtle way, she actually initiates their relationship. I don't know what this look is. Yeah. This? Is it more of like a... Not to be needed is a slow death for a man. Martians did not need nurturing, but instead wanted to provide for and take care of the Venusians. Men have no emotional needs except for the dark, womb-like embrace of their cave. Dr. Mr. John Gray also has some thoughts on race that I'm sure you want to hear. He talks about the revolution of rising expectations, which is a theory that as social conditions improve, people expect more from their government, their social institutions, their general quality of life, and when those expectations aren't met, that's when you get civil unrest. The revolution of rising expectations used to get a lot of credit for the social changes of the 1960s. It's fallen out of favor since then because there's not a lot of proof for it, but not before John Gray had the chance to write this. In the 60s, during the Johnson administration, for the first time, minorities were given more rights than ever before. As a result, there were explosions of anger, rioting, and violence. These are already some very bad sentences, but it goes on. This is an example of repressed feelings resurfacing. When the minorities felt more supported, they felt an upsurge of resentful and angry feelings. And his point is that relationships are the same way, but I don't think that's a good way to communicate that concept. Obviously, I don't know John Gray's heart, but that sequence of words sounds pretty racist, and was also demonstrably untrue at the time. Johnson ordered the Kerner Commission to discover why racial unrest happens, and they said it was mostly white racism, especially police violence. Anytime you're playing Jeopardy and the prompt is blank is the reason something messed up in America, buzz in and guess white racism and you're going to be right 9 times out of 10. It's a more reliable bet than minorities felt supported. We get a Venusian to Martian phrase dictionary where we learn what women say, what they mean, and what men think they mean. When a woman says, no one listens to me anymore, she means, I seem to be very sensitive today. Would you listen to me and continue to ask me supportive questions such as, what happened today? What else happened? How do you feel? What did you want? How else do you feel? Or just listen, and occasionally when I pause, make one of these reassuring sounds. Oh, humph, uh-huh, and Note, Martians had never heard of these sounds before arriving on Venus. Fellas, is it womanly to say oh? Oh, uh-huh, these are all examples of back-channeling, which is all of the verbal and nonverbal cues that we give off to indicate that we're engaged with a story. People of all genders from all over the world do it. The idea that it's somehow woman-coded makes it sound like this guy has never talked to someone who was actually listening. And then he translates, no one listens to me anymore, into what a man hears, which is, I give you my attention and you don't listen to me. You have become a very boring person to be with. I want someone exciting and interesting, and you are definitely not that person. You have disappointed me. You are selfish, uncaring, and bad. Which is just wildly negative for no reason. When a woman says, I'm thirsty, what men hear is, I'm going to put you in a Fremen death still so I can reclaim the water from your body and drink it. If a woman, or any person, if women are indeed human, says something as broadly sweeping as, nobody listens to me anymore, the only way to know what she means is to ask her. Maybe she does mean, I seem to be very sensitive today. Or maybe she means, you don't listen to me. Or maybe she means, I was in an elevator with a bunch of clowns and I asked them to press 9 for me, but then they all just tooted their little horns instead. You really don't know until you ask. Gray also has some tips for women who want to approach a man with criticism or advice. If she doesn't like his table manners and they are alone, she could say, without a disapproving look, would you use your silverware? Or, would you drink from your glass? Where was he drinking from if not his glass?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Gray says that sometimes women engage in punishing behaviors, like hitting or breaking things. To be fair, he acknowledges that this is bad, but then he puts it on the same level as other bad things like blaming and refusing to share feelings. Let's pause for the irony that when a man doesn't want to share his feelings, it's just because he's a rubber band with his dragon in a cave, but when a woman doesn't want to share feelings, she's punishing. And we're back. Hitting and breaking things are domestic violence. You would think that John Gray, as a champion of men, would not want them to be in physically abusive relationships. I guess abuse is fine on Mars. Part of what he projects onto women is this idea that we're constantly scoring men, giving them points when they do things right. And he has some interesting ideas on how the scoring system works. To a woman, a single rose gets as many points as paying the rent on time. This is not true. I had an ex who would buy me random trinkets that I hadn't asked for, snacks, clothes, whatever. Then he would make a big deal about how generous he was and refuse to pay his half of the rent because, he was such a generous guy and I should just be generous too. I guess on Mars, the caves provide universal housing, so they're confused on Earth with a housing market. He makes a list of 100 ways to score points with a woman. Give her 4 hugs a day. If my boyfriend only gave me 4 hugs a day, I would be very sad. Notice when the trash is full and offer to empty it. No, just empty it. If you think the trash is full, make an executive decision. Martian's whole thing is competency, right? Competency in hats? Empty the trash. When holding hands, don't let your hand go limp. Grip her like this. Just give her 20 minutes of unsolicited quality attention. Don't read the newspaper or be distracted by anything else during this time. 20 whole minutes. That's almost as long as an episode of Friends. Be patient when she is sharing. Don't look at your watch. When listening to her talk, use eye contact. Touch her with your hand sometimes when you talk to her. Glad he specified with your hand. Otherwise, you'd just have guys just jabbing at women with their elbows. When she talks to you, put the magazine down or turn off the TV and give her your full attention. Don't answer the phone at intimate moments. Practice listening and asking questions. When listening to her, reassure her that you are listening by making little noises. These are 8 different tips that all just boil down to listening to a woman, which Gray says is difficult for a man because he mistakenly assumes that there is a logical order when a woman randomly changes from one problem to another. There's an assumption throughout the book that women are just constantly complaining and men don't like it. The last time my boyfriend zoned out while I was talking was not because I was complaining, it was because I was telling him about the Chinese Civil War and he was not interested. He was quite bored, and he did not really want to hear my thoughts on the Kuomintang, or to hear me try to pronounce Kuomintang. Kuomintang. I'm not getting that first syllable. Kuomintang. Kuomintang. I'm not doing a good job with the tones. Kuomintang. And I don't know how much I should be anglicizing. This is why I didn't want to hear my theories. Then Gray reveals that apparently Martians give penalty points. When a woman hurts a man's feelings, he takes away the points that she has already earned. I asked my boyfriend about this, and he said the whole point system sounds complicated and he would rather hear about the Chinese Civil War. So that's a win for me. Kuomintang. Someone tell me if I'm getting it even close to right. Gray is very into the point system. He says all men really need is love, but then love is this hidden attitude that a man can easily project onto a woman or not. I guess the Maharishi gave him mind-reading powers. When a woman prepares a meal for a man, he gives her 1 point or 10 points depending on how she is feeling toward him. He may even give minus points because she was resenting him. This is my resentment, guacamole. Gray makes a list of all the ways women can earn points with men, and it's mostly just tolerating when men do a bad job. He disappoints her and she doesn't punish him, 10 to 20 points. He gets lost while driving and she doesn't make a big deal, 10 to 20 points. He gets lost and she sees the good in the situation and says, "We would never have seen this beautiful sunset if we had taken the most direct route," 20 to 30 points. He forgets to pick something up and she says, "It's okay, would you do it the next time you are out?" That'll get her 10 to 20 points. But if he forgets again and she says, with trusting patience and persistence, "It's okay, would you still get it?" That can get you 20 to 30 points. And if you ask a man to go to the store for a jar of peanut butter and he returns with 6 Nerf guns and a can of mushrooms, you should just say, "Oh, good boy, you did exactly what mommy wanted." And then you can have 1,000 points. She asks for his support and he says no, and she is not hurt by his rejection. 10 to 20 points. Another time, she asked for his support, and again he says no. She does not make him feel wrong, but accepts his limitations, 20 to 30 points. She feels disapproving, and instead of expressing it, she goes in another room and privately centers herself and then comes back with a more centered and loving heart, 10 to 20 points. How will my boyfriend know to give me points? I'm just gonna go into another room and yell out, I'm coming back with a more centered and loving heart. He also recommends going to therapy, which is a good idea. Just go to someone reputable. Don't go to this guy. Or to BetterHelp. There's a chapter on how to ask for support, but it's only addressed to women. He says that men won't offer their support, which is already a pretty wild statement. Most men know how to say, like, how are you doing? Are you going through a tough time? Let me offer you one support. Then he says that because men never offer, women have to ask, but they can't demand or else he'll give even less, which just makes me feel like I'm watching the cognitive dissonance speeches from Barbie.
It's too hard. It's too contradictory.
Don't worry, Totally Real Dr. Gray has a 3-step process for us Venusians. Step 1, notice all of the things he's doing and then ask him to do those things. Nothing more. Just the things he was already doing. He may be conditioned by you, or his mother, immediately to say no to your requests. In step 1, you'll be reconditioning him to respond positively to your requests. This is not how you talk to a human. This is how you teach a horse to load into a trailer. You also have to have perfect timing. You can't ask him to empty the trash when he's about to empty the trash. You also can't ask him to empty the trash when he's involved in something else, so you have to just follow him around the house, waiting for the perfect moment to ask him about the trash. You're also not allowed to say could or can. You have to say would or will. Like the obnoxious English teacher thing where you're like, can I go to the bathroom? And they're like, may you go to the bathroom? If your husband is acting like the English teacher from the Black Lagoon and policing your modal verbs, he sucks. On Mars, it would be an insult to ask a man, can you empty the trash? The question is not, can he empty the trash, but will he empty the trash? After he has been insulted, he may say no just because you have irritated him. That's an extremely petty thing for men to do to women they supposedly love? Some people are into the idea of making small linguistic changes in order to shift their mindset, like replacing I have to with I get to. So I have to go to work becomes I get to go to work. If making tweaks like that helps you, absolutely go for it. But if someone else says, I'm a gig economy worker and I have to work 60 hours a week to make ends meet, and you say, no, you get to work 60 hours a week to make ends meet, that's not helpful. Speaking of being unhelpful, let's get some testimonials from men. When I say yes, I could do that, I am not committing myself to doing it. I'm just saying that I could do it. I have not promised to do it. Dude thinks he's a leprechaun saying, I told you I could take you to my gold. I didn't say I would. And then vanishing into the mist.
Tippity-ta-ti-ta.
When my wife says, can you bring out the trash? I just don't answer. Then she asks, why? And I don't even know. Now I realize why. I feel controlled. I can respond to would you. You just don't answer? Is he giving her the silent treatment? Or is he like, I don't know. Who's to say? It's a riddle for the ages. When my wife says, can you change Christopher's diaper? I think inside, sure, I can change it. I am capable, are you? And a diaper is a simple thing to change. But if I don't feel like doing it, I might make some excuse. Now if she asked, would you change Christopher's diaper? I would say, yeah, sure, and do it. How about this for a method? It's your freaking kid. Change the freaking diaper. Is this how you want your children to see you? Oh yeah. Daddy loves us so much that he provides for some of our basic needs as long as mommy uses the right code word. That's why there's not an equivalent chapter for men on how to ask women nicely with the right modal verb to do household tasks. Because women are expected to do the lion's share of the housework and child rearing, and anything men do is support that's provided on special request. Which brings us to step 2 is when you ask him for stuff you know he probably won't do, but then when he says no, you say, okay, or better yet, no problem. Gray even says that every time you accept him saying no, he'll give you 5 to 10 points. I would abuse that system. I'd be like, can you go to doggy daycare and pick up a puppy that's not ours? And when he said no, I'd be like, that's 10 points, biatch, should have gotten me a dog. Step 3 is when you ask him to do something, and when he says no, you just stand there, silently, until he does what you ask. Hey, can you steal me a dog? No. Okay, I'll steal you a dog. That's it. We did it. We made it through the first book, but stick around because I am reading more, and at some point the Food and Drug Administration is gonna get involved. Until then, like, subscribe, comment what it's like on the planet where you're from, and I'll see you next time.